Hello, welcome to the Quicksilver Adventuring Company. Today I'd like to go over some character creation basics and actually build a character during the video, and mainly to help new players, but older hats may find it useful as well, but this is primarily going to be focused to someone totally new to the game. There's actually a lot of rules to the game, but I don't want to overwhelm new players, so I'm going to pretty much stick to the player's handbook on this video. There's several other source materials out there. There's homebrew rules. You can find pretty much anything you want on the web. There are actually several steps in the process before you even pick up one of these. So we're going to start with those, and then we'll move into where you actually start needing to roll and the dice actually become part of the process. You probably have a rough idea of what you want to play or maybe interested in playing, but if you don't, that's okay too. We'll go into that as well. But there are 5 things that I want to cover before we even start picking up the dice that you need to choose. And you can be working on in tandem. You could just do it one at a time. Doesn't matter. That list, the list of 5 things I'm showing here, that's personality, background, class, subclass, and species. My personal preference is to kind of pick a personality that I want to play, like be it an aspect of myself. In my early days, I actually did play myself in a game, but I just picked a class to go along with that. And while I was learning, I found that quite helpful. But another thing that I like to do is pick an aspect of a book I've read, a character in that book, a character in a movie, character in a TV show, or just something I thought of spontaneously. Doesn't really matter. Just pick that personality, and that personality could probably lead you into what class you think that person would be. Just to expand a bit more on the personalities, it could be someone that's from a fantasy genre, like anyone from Lord of the Rings. It could even be a personality from your favorite comedic sitcom. Doesn't really matter. Just latch onto that and use that as your basis for who you want this person to be and how they may behave. For something simple for our character creation, let's go with something most of you have probably seen Lord of the Rings. If not, go watch it. It's definitely worth it. But let's go with a dwarven fighter. And so to that end, class-wise, I'm going to go ahead and pick fighter. And then species-wise, I'm going to pick dwarf. From a class perspective, there are actually 12 listed in the player's handbook. There's actually a 13th called artificer, but it's in another book. But since this is your first time, stick with player's handbook and don't go into any of the other supplemental books yet. Just let's start with the basics. Most of the classes in the player's handbook have about 3 subclasses to choose from. The fighter's no different. You have champion, battle master, and eldritch knight. Eldritch Knight's more of a caster style, the Battle Master's more of a tactician, and the champion's more of a solo fighter type. For new players, I tend to default to pick what interests you because it's your first time. You're going to want to have fun and pick whichever one sounds like it will interest you the most. You want your first experience to be a good experience. Choosing a species. So you've got 9 to choose from in the player's handbook, and there are many more in the official source materials, and there are a lot more on homebrew websites and such. But for our purposes, let's stick to the player's handbook. And we've chosen dwarf for this example. Once you decide what species you want to play, be sure you read about them thoroughly, get an idea of what they do, who they are. And then each one will typically have a couple subspecies beneath them. So like, just different areas you've grown in. Maybe they're subterranean, maybe they live in a forest typically. You're not required to, but that just gives you a basic idea of, where they grew up. There are also 13 backgrounds to choose from. This is basically how your character grew up, your youth. What have you learned before you became whatever class you are now? It could be entertainer. It could be there's folk hero. The list is right here. And so you just need to pick one of these, and each one will give you certain skills, abilities. Maybe it's a language. Maybe it could even be a gaming set, like, any kind of like card game or dice or something. But there's actually a lot of background information as to what your character came from. And so there are actual ideas in most of them for like personality traits, events that have happened in your past. You don't have to go with these, or you can go with these if you just would like to. It's totally up to you. For our background option, I'm going to go with something simple and straightforward for this Dwarven fighter. I'm going to simply pick soldier. You could very easily figure out a way to make an entertainer work or any of the other backgrounds, but I'm going to go with soldier for this one. One thing you do need to choose, which kind of goes along with your background and personality, is alignment. This is essentially, there are 9 different types. There's essentially good, neutral, and evil. Then there's lawful, neutral, and chaotic. And then they all are listed here. And so, like, for example, a criminal might be more towards the neutral or evil side. You might be able to figure out a way to make good work for you, but lawful probably would not. So it just depends on what you're doing and how you plan on playing this character as to which one would fit you most appropriately. Now that we have those basics out of the way, let's start putting things on paper. So there is a character sheet at the back of the player's handbook that can be photocopied, but there are many PDFs online for that character sheet and variations that other players have made. Personally, I like a variant of the one in the back of the player's handbook because I'm not a huge fan of the skills section as it's written in the player's handbook, but I'll include a link to the one that I like within the description, but for the purpose of this video, I'm going to go ahead and use the player's handbook variant. At the top of the sheet is the blanks for class level. In this case, it'll be, in our example, it's going to be fighter level 1. Underneath it, it says race, but the new books are moving to species. That's why I'm using it here. So you would write your species down there, which would be dwarf. And then background, you write whichever one you've gone with. In this case, we're going with soldier. And don't forget to write down your alignment like I almost did. Go ahead and write down whatever your character's name is. You're going to have to pick one. It can be whatever you want it to be. And then personality, I really don't write that down, but you can to a degree if you want to. Let's continue filling out the character sheet and let's move on to the statistics. There's 6. There's strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. And each class has its own primary stat and a secondary that within these 6. So this is where we might actually pick up some dice depending on what method you want to use to generate your statistics. There are 2 actual methods in the book to generate your stats. The first one is actually using die rolls. So you would use 4 6-sided dice and roll them and then remove the lowest. So if you were to roll 4 of them, get a 5, 5, 5, and a 3, then you take away the 3 and then you add the 3 5s together and get 15. And you do that a total of 6 times. And now you have 6 stats for your character. And that you would populate within the actual stat blanks for each, like strength, dexterity, and so on. The other method gives you a 27-point pool to pull from, and that is used to actually calculate your statistic. There's a chart in the book, and I'll show it here, but that actually can be generated from this chart. You take each cost of the stat, and like, let's say you want to do a 15. 15 cost 9 points. You subtract that from the 27, leaving you with 18 points to spend amongst your other 5 stats. Let's continue using our Dwarven fighter as for the points example. You have 27 points to spend from, and let's say I want to go ahead and get the highest number possible. So I want to get a 15. So I spend 9, leaving me with 18. Then let's say I also want a 14 that costs 7, leaving me with 11. And then let's say I want to go ahead and get a 13 that costs 5, leaving me with 6. And then let's say I pick an 11 for my next stat that costs 3, leaving me with 3 points. And then a 10, which costs 2 points, leaving me with 1, and a 9, which costs 1 point, leaving me with nothing. That finishes off all my 27 points. And we have 6 statistics. Please keep in mind that these are by no means the only options available to you. They just happen to be the 2 in the book. And so please work with your DM and see if there's actually something that person would prefer to use. But if not, this is the 2 in the player's handbook. And for your first game, I definitely suggest sticking to this. Let's continue with our Dwarven fighter example. And now that we have our stats, I'm going to go ahead and place them. So like, for example, fighter has primary stats of strength and constitution. There are some dex-based fighters, but for my particular example, I'm going to use strength. So I'm going to put my 15 on strength. Then I'm going to put my 14 on constitution, 13 on dexterity. The 11 is going to go to intelligence, 10 on the wisdom, and 9 on charisma. One thing about your stats is they are the basis for most things that your character does. And so for the rest of the sheet, that's why I started here, is because we're going to have to use them as the base calculation for many of the abilities on the sheet. And so next, we need to move into the species bonuses, as they can actually impact those statistics. So we need to get that out of the way before we move on to anything else. Let's review your species traits and go ahead and get them written onto your character sheet. The first thing I look at is, in this case, basic dwarven traits. First off, you get a +2 to your constitution. So in our case, we're going to change our 14 to a 16 and leave it there because you're a dwarf. And then age-wise, it's not a huge bearing, but it can have a role-playing piece. Dwarves typically are mature at 50, and I think they live, book says, about 350 years. So in my case, on this example I'm going to make him about 65. And then alignment is really up to you. Treat the book as a guideline, but however you want to play your character, you're not required to play it a certain way. They just give you a basic idea of how dwarves typically behave. And then the height of a dwarf is usually between 4 to 5 feet. Let's go ahead and make this one 4'6", just right in the middle. You can always have it even shorter or larger if you want. Clear with your DM if it's outside the normal range, but there definitely are humans outside that normal range. So nothing wrong with making your character a little bit different as well. And then they can see in the dark. They live underground most of the time, or have the option to. They can see up to 60 feet with dark vision. So you need to notate that. One thing that you will find is that the sheet does not have dedicated spots for many of these traits, but there are sections you can add it to, like we're doing here. They have resilience. They have advantage on poison saves and resistance against poison damage. So you need to write that down as well. Then dwarves have a natural combat training. They are trained no matter what class you are. They have battle axe, hand axe, light hammer, and warhammer. So you know how to use those no matter what profession you are. And then there's tool proficiencies. You can gain a proficiency in an artisan tool of your choice. It tends to be like brewing, smithing. It's listed in the book. And then stone cutting. Dwarves typically do live underground, and they know a lot about stonework. So if you do a history check based on stonework, you actually get double your proficiency bonus to actually understand the history behind the stonework you're observing. And then languages wise, you have common and dwarfish. You can read and write both. I almost forgot speed. Dwarves have a base walking speed of 25. And they are not hindered by the armor they wear. They can wear as heavy armor as they want, and they still have that base walking speed of 25. And then, since in my example, we're playing a hill dwarf, we're going to actually add a couple more things. You actually get a +1 to your wisdom. So we're going to raise their wisdom, in this case, from a 10 to 11. And then there's dwarven toughness. Each time you gain a level plus this initial level, you get an extra 1 to your maximum health. So we need to notate that, and every time you level up and this initial creation, we need to take that into account. Now that we have the stat impacting processes out of the way, we have our final stats for level 1. So let's go ahead and add the bonuses we get for each. The chart is on page 13 in the book and shown here. But when the new book comes out shortly, DnD 1, it actually may have a different page number, but the chart's probably going to be about the same. But for our current character, for example, our strength of 15 is a +2, and our new constitution of 16 is a +3. Dexterity of 13 is a +1. The intelligence of 11 is a 0. The wisdom of 11 is a 0. And then our 9 charisma is actually a -1. So we just need to notate this like I am on the screen here. And then we'll be able to use these numbers for calculations of our proficiencies and such. Next, let's add our background to our character sheet. We picked soldier for the example, and soldiers actually have skill proficiencies they gain. They get athletics and intimidation. So circle in the bubbles like I am on the screen here to mark that you have those skills. And then you have tool proficiencies as well. You get a gaming set and a land vehicle. So it could be, some type of dice game, card games, etc. You can ask your DM what games exist. I mean, it could be something as simple as poker or whatever else exists in the world you're going to be playing in. Then land vehicles could be a stagecoach, any type of wagon. It just depends on what the type of land vehicles are in the world you're playing in, but that's an example of what they're referring to. And then the equipment list and personality traits, that's more of an optional flair for your character of things you can have. And so again, write that down, get with your DM, make sure it applies. And then feel free to use the personality traits if you want. Use the random rolls to help determine it if you feel more comfortable doing that. But this section, the personality piece, is up to you as to how you want to play, like we've discussed prior in this video. It's time to add the fighter abilities to my example character here. Now, whatever class you've chosen, you'll be adding that to yours. So my fighter starts off with a +2 proficiency bonus at level 1. So I'm going to mark that here. Starting health is 10 in this case for level 1 plus con bonus, which is 3 for this character. So 13 plus dwarven toughness. So I have a total of 14 health. And then fighters have all armor options. They essentially can wear anything from plate mail to leather and then carry shields. They're proficient and can use all of them without any penalty. And then weapon-wise, they're proficient in all simple and martial weapons. Essentially, they have access to basically everything. And then the main stats for this character are strength and con. So that's where you get advantage your proficiency bonus to saving throws. So we'll fill in the bubble here for those two stats. And then skills, you have a list of skills to choose from. You get to pick 2. For this particular character, I'm going to pick animal handling and survival. Starting equipment, this would be like your armor. If you have a shield, what weapons you have, backpacks, any normal gear. Think of something you might carry around if you were going to go on a trip, a hiking trip or something similar. So, but clear this with your GM to make sure that nothing you're choosing is out of the ordinary for the area. And sometimes your GM may give you gear. Just depends on the situation and what you're about to run. Then you pick a fighting style for this character. And for mine, I'm picking great weapon fighting. There's a list. And then also I have second wind. So I'm going to have that as well at level 1. And I like to write the note of what it is plus a quick summary. Filling out the whole thing can fill up the page rather quickly. So I tend to not do that. I will basically do a short little note section as to what the ability does and maybe even page reference number so that I know where to go find it if I need to read the full description. One thing I need to call out for this character is I actually do not get my subclass abilities until level 3, so they really have no practical impact on the actual character at this point, other than this is the direction I want to take the character. So I will be role-playing it along those lines at this level until I get to level 3 so that it actually makes sense what I've chosen. And of course, you can choose to change that. Maybe you want to go with a different subclass once you get to level 3 and you actually start playing and you figure out that what you've chosen is not quite right. You're not restricted at all at this point. And once you actually get to that level and choose, that's when you're actually committed. Now I actually want to go ahead and fill out the saving throw section on your character sheet. If you notice, mine are filled out with the X's, the bubbles filled in with strength and constitution. Now each class has its own different set of stats that they're proficient in, but with these, you get to add the stat bonus plus the proficiency bonus. So like in my case, constitution +3 +2 for proficiency. So my total is +5. So go ahead and fill out the rest of this. In my case, strength will be an additional +2 on top of the strength bonus, but the others will just be the straight bonus that's actually applied to the actual stat. Okay, let's go ahead and do our skills. They function much the same way as the saving throws in the sense that the skills that you actually have bubbled, or in my case X, you actually add your proficiency bonus on top of your stat modifier. So the stat associated with the skills in this small, annoyingly light print on the side of the skill. So like, for example, athletics, I have that X'd. And so I will add my strength modifier plus my proficiency modifier. You get a total of +4. So I would add +4 to whatever roll I make when I do athletics checks within the game. And that works for all the skills below. So anything that you do not have proficiency in, therefore it's not extra bubbled on the circle, you just add the stat modifier itself. Like anything charisma based, my character is going to have a -1. So that's the way they function for this. Go ahead and fill it out for your character. Here's an example of my completed list. And so yours should look similar, but based on your stats. Now we need to fill out some of the miscellaneous sections on the sheet. I'll start with hit dice. Essentially, that is equal to a number of dice equal to what you roll for hit points at each level. So in my case, a fighter, I roll a d10. I'm level 1, so I'll have 1d10 hit dice. And that increases by level. So at level 2 would have 2d10, a level 3 I have 3d10, and so on. After that, we'll do initiative. At this point, you take the dexterity modifier for your character. Like in my case, it's a +1, and that's your initiative modifier. This is how you determine who goes in what order for the players in combat or any other thing the DM determines needs an initiative order. Regarding armor class, this is essentially how hard you are to be hit. And for my example, for my fighter, I'm going to be using a scale mail, which is an armor class of 14, and then then you add your dexterity modifier on top of that. So my armor class in my case is a 15. But keep in mind, there are some restrictions on the armor as to how much dexterity you can use. Some have a max of 2, some you can't use any at all. Some have restrictions to stealth rolls, essentially hiding. Look at your armor options and then try to make an educated guess or reach out to some of the people you're going to be playing with as to what the best choice is for your character. Next, we have passive perception. This is essentially your character's ability to walk into a room without even thinking to look for anything, just to happen to notice something. And you would take 10 plus your wisdom modifier. And then if you have proficiency on your wisdom, then you would add that as well. But there are other modifiers that can be added that if it applies. But generally speaking, it's 10 plus wisdom. And if your proficiency applies, then that as well. So like in my character's case, proficiency does not apply. So I'm looking at 10 plus 1. That's really it for the fighter that we've made. The only thing that would be remaining would be for casters. Things like spell slots. Most level 1 casters, I believe all of the primary casters get 2 spell slots per level at first level. So you get 2 plus 2 cantrips. Each caster type is going to have a primary stat for their casting ability. Druids is wisdom, sorcerers is charisma, wizards are intelligence. And so you just need to write that down in this spot. Spell DC, and which is calculated by you take 8 plus your proficiency modifier plus the stat bonus to your primary stat. So like a druid would be wisdom and a wizard would be intelligence. Then after that is the actual spell attack modifier, which is your proficiency bonus plus, again, that's primary stat modifier. Wisdom for the druid, intelligence for the wizard, and so on. Well, that was a lot. This is a lot of information to put on paper, and it's a good starting point for your character to get you into the game and ready to play. There's a lot more to this game, and we've only used 1 book. And so just if you enjoy it, there's a lot more information out there. There's tons on the web. Feel free to peruse and find anything you like and try anything new that you want to. This game is very open-ended and you can do many things. And I really hope you enjoy your first game. This is a passion of mine, and I do really enjoy this game. I've been playing it far too long, and I'm not showing any signs of stopping. But if you like this video, hit the like button and feel free to subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be continuing to send out videos and hopefully help other people get into and enjoy this game. Thanks.